Okay, we will slowly start. Good afternoon. I'm so happy to see you all again here, and I want to thank you for really great contributions yesterday and in the Discord app. Today's day will be hosted by Jason Marcus from the University of Cape Town. I will introduce Jason and then he will take over chairing the day. So Jason is a specialist midwife and health professions educationalist. He serves as a senior lecturer in undergraduate education in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Cape Town. His background is in primary perinatal care and health system strengthening with a focus on upskilling healthcare workers in emergency obstetric care in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. His recent work focus has been on undergraduate education and curriculum change to incorporate client-centeredness in maternity care. He is an active trainer in respectful maternity care and serves as a consultant in incorporating RMC into maternity care services in Limpopo Province, South Africa. A very warm welcome for Jason.
Thanks very much, Vedanta. It's good to be here, and what a privilege and honor to be part of this disruption on the global scale. Just to create a bit of context, we are currently experiencing what is called load shedding in South Africa, where certain areas are without power for certain parts of the day. So we just need to be prepared for any eventuality, because I might just suddenly disappear off here, but I've decided to come to the office to do this. Because I think at the hospital we're a bit protected from it. So if I may, I'm just going to give a couple of opening remarks. I've put together some slides just to create a context of how care is provided in South Africa. The other contributors for the afternoon are Shanaz Mushi, Lance Louskieter, and Jabu Mavuso. Rochelle Chadwick was supposed to be with us. She's unfortunately taken ill, but she's got a pre-recorded lecture that's available on the It's Learning platform for you to access. And there will be time later during the break for you to be able to engage with what she's contributing to the session. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just to give everybody a bit of a perspective of what happens in the South African healthcare setting. Can everybody see that? Okay. In terms of background, South Africa has a very big divide in how pregnancy and childcare is provided. So there's the public and private aspects of it. The majority of women seek public healthcare for pregnancy care, and only about, say, 17 to 19% of the pregnant population will access private healthcare. And within private healthcare, there's care being provided by independent midwives versus obstetricians. So the majority of women see obstetricians during their pregnancies, and invariably they will end up having a cesarean section because the cesarean section rates are extraordinarily high in the private hospital sector. Now, in terms of the intrapartum care, it is very prescriptive because it's based on the partogram, and all of you are probably familiar with it. If not, I'm happy to explain it. Is there anybody that knows what the partograph is? Who does not know, sorry. Okay, you can just put up your hand and I'm happy to... Okay, so Marjolaine, so the partogram is a labor monitoring tool where we look at the contractions, the dilatation of the cervix, the descent of the fetal head. This instrument is a medical legal imperative in interpartum care, particularly in the public sector. I'm happy to show you what it looks like. I can always just send you an image of it in the chat later. Now, what this does is it disregards the multitude of factors that can influence the birthing process. And in this, the magic of labor and birth is lost because the focus is all on what the cervix is or not doing. And this is where the interventions tend to happen because we don't let nature take its course as it should be. Right. So we kind of forget about the birthing person. We're just looking at the mechanics of what's going on. Now, the current approaches in South Africa is that the masters at the WHO have put out these recommendations for a positive childbirth experience. The problem here is that we are still looking at the mere mechanics of labor. Although the idea is to improve the birthing person's experience, it does so in a very mechanistic way. It also is very exclusive because they speak about women-centered care rather than people identify as other who may also seek pregnancy and childbirth care. They do, however, acknowledge the ubiquity of the abuse and mistreatment of laboring people and birthing people across the globe. And there is some recognition that labor and birth are complex processes and not just mere a uterus and cervix, etc., doing what they need to do. So historically, in our setting, where labor is arrested or labor is slowed down, for whatever reason, we look at these P's here. So this is what's taught in our curricula across the country, and this has been the case for the last, say, 40, 50 years. So we look at the powers, which is the contractions of the uterus, doing what they're supposed to do. We look at the adequacy of the pelvis, the passage for the baby to get through. We look at the passenger, which is the baby, if there's anything going or amiss with the baby in terms of how it's positioned in the pelvis or how, if there's any abnormalities in the baby. And then also the patient or the mother or the birthing person in terms of her state of well-being. But basically, it's only looking at the physical well-being of the woman rather than the total well-being. So, but this is not the be-all and the end-all of birthing. And I've come up with another couple of P's to be a bit more holistic in terms of the care we provide. So there's the part, I'll speak more to these as we go along, the partner presence, the psyche of the woman, the attitudes and behavior of the personnel, positioning of the patient in labor and during birth, and also the positionality of those providing care, the paraphernalia associated with birthing, what pain relief strategies we use, the place where the birth takes place, and the pedagogy of those looking after how they were taught, what they were taught, and how they are presenting their teachings and learnings when they provide care. And all of these should take into account the very basic needs of a person birthing. So the one thing that happens is that in our maternity case records, there is a section where it says where birth companion has to be identified. And again, this is misinterpreted to be the person present only during the second stage of labor or when when the birthing person starts to push. And it flies in the face of what actually it means, where the companion or partner should be there throughout the whole process. Now, again, people are imposing this, although there's a lot of evidence from the global north, obviously, to show that it does improve the childbirth experience of the birthing person. But this is not weighed up against of what is culturally acceptable. In South Africa, we have a very multicultural society, and this is not acceptable to all societies to have a partner or a companion present, particularly if they are male. And the other problem with having enabling partners being present during the labor and birth is the way facilities are designed. I'll speak more to how the design of the facilities, how this flies in the face of what the needs of the laboring person are. The next is the psyche of the birthing person. We don't really get to know our clients Because sometimes the first time we encounter them is in the labor ward. So we don't have that continuity of care where a provider would be looking after the pregnant person or the pregnant person from the get-go and through the labor and birthing process. So at various points, they meet different people looking after them during these processes. And society, I mean, South African society is known for being extremely violent. We've got high rates of gender-based violence. Rape is common in this country. And providers are often very ignorant of these traumas people have experienced before. And when they come and seek care, and in terms of the invasiveness of what we need to do, like doing vaginal examinations during labor, we can be causing people to relive traumas that they've experienced in the past. And there is a distinct lack of awareness and insight into the behavioral cues associated with labor progress, because we've given this all up to the medical establishment. So we're just going to look at the cervix and what it's doing, and not looking at the woman's behavior or the birthing person's behavior. And within that, the wisdom of midwifery needs to be rediscovered and brought to the fore in terms of providing care, particularly during labor. The next P is the personnel, attitudes, and behavior. Provider behaviors are known to affect the laboring woman's psychological and emotional well-being. And people have to understand the stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and their relationship with oxytocin, because these, for those who are not health workers, that these stress hormones can cause the oxytocin release in the bodies to be minimized, and thereby influencing the progress of labor. And we are in a society where teen pregnancy is rife. We in a society in South Africa, particularly where we have asylum seekers seeking maternity care, and also people crossing the borders in the Southern African region in order to access care in South Africa. And the problem is from the documented literature is that women of non-South African descent from the African continent are treated very differently, and sometimes badly, and more badly when they seek care in our settings. There's also this practice of production line care, where women are seen, and they must be seen as quickly as possible, because the staff want to get through the number of people quite quickly. So there's no engagement, there's no real connection with the people that seek care from us. And this is in response, firstly, to, not response, but this is because of the attitudes of personnel, the power that they perceive themselves to have over the people seeking care, and also the staff numbers, because we've got a very low healthcare staff numbers in the country, and the staff-patient ratios are sometimes quite unmanageable. The other thing is that the power that health workers think they have gets them to disregard the birthers' insight into their own bodies, and taking control over the process, and not only over the process but over the person as well, stemming from back in the day where, you do what I say, because I know everything, and I'm going to tell you what to do with your body. And a key midwifery ingredient that is completely lacking in the care that's been provided is patience. Patience with people, patience with process, and patience with being, allowing others to be in these settings. Then in terms of position, the other thing that we perpetuate this thing of supine birth, women having to lay on their backs to have their babies. And this is born out of how people are being taught, what they're being taught, and how the birth process is being taught in the undergraduate curriculums. It is a matter of power assertion that, as I mentioned earlier on, that health workers assert their power over people that they perceive to be lesser than them. And then also the design and setup of birthing spaces in South Africa. because our birthing spaces have been designed by white obstetricians in the 60s and 70s into the 80s, without inputs from the women that need it, without looking at any evidence, which very little existed at the time, and certainly without the input of midwives before midwifery was tarnished by the medical establishment. They disregard this whole risk of the blood pressure dropping when the woman is laying on her back, because we tell them throughout the pregnancies don't do that, but when they come to have their babies, we force them into that position. And also again, this disregard for what physiologically happens to prepare the body for labor, and not harnessing that that magic and that miracle that that the body can go through in order to facilitate birth. And then also there's this whole protecting the perineum police in our country, because as soon as you mention birthing positions other than supine, this is one of the arguments that come out, because how are we going to control the perineum if we can't see what it's doing? Yeah, so we've got a long way to go in changing mindsets in the South African healthcare context. The paraphernalia would then be the things, the tools that we can use to either to enable, or the tools that we are using to hinder the labor progress. So things that can enable a labor would be things like birthing balls that we can see there. This is during an antenatal education class, and people are told about the birth process and pain relief strategies, etc., during labor. And now our setting, so this is one of in the top, the bottom right here, this is one of the beds in one of our secondary hospitals. Again, you can see there's the electronic fetal monitoring device there. You still see that in this facility in in another part of the country. That's me in my really good boots that I got in Portugal, just demonstrating the inhumanity and the loss of dignity when you're putting people on their backs on the bed, legs astride, with them having absolutely no control over their whole bodies. So these are all the things that we need to consider in redesigning and disrupting childbirth care within our settings, here in South Africa particularly. Now, pain relief is a very poorly not understood, but poorly provided care strategy in labor. There's a belief that pethidine or your opioids are your go-to pain relief strategies in labor, but this is only if it's offered at all, because in some instances it's available, but the staff just don't give it. And there's this idea that your perception of pain and how we respond to that runs along ethnic or racial lines. And this is a sad reality in our setting, because if you're from, say, Mozambique, you're less likely to get pain relief as opposed to somebody who is from within the community that the birth worker is attached. But also very little consideration is given to non-pharmacological means of pain relief, where even something as basic as a warm running shower or the availability of a warm bath in a birthing facility is not looked at. And also just somebody rubbing the back of the laboring person, that also provides some form of pain relief. So we've got a long way to go in terms of making sure that people get what they need in our settings. And a lot of what is not being offered, which would be beneficial, is based on a very, like, the boss said so, the person at the top said so, and this is what we're going to do. We're not using our own initiative, we're not using our own instincts, we're not using our own wisdom to provide the care that the laboring person needs. And then the last thing is the place. So what you see here is one of our primary midwife obstetric units, and these are the birthing spaces. You see these beds, they're high, there's no space around it really, it's cold, it's I mean, it's brightly lit if the lights are on. So this one in the middle is on, this one is not. But the lights remain on all the time because the staff need to see what's going on at any given minute. So they disregard the evolutionary needs of a birthing person, where subdued lighting, low noise levels are necessary, labels are notoriously loud, phones ringing, people shouting at each other, music playing for the staff's convenience, and the way the staff also interact with each other. So these are all the things that are not being considered when providing the much needed chilled care that is necessary during labor. And the last thing I want to speak about is the teachings. We've got this massive intrusion of the nursing and medical paradigm into midwifery care in South Africa. Midwifery care is completely undervalued, right? And part of it is having that wisdom to knowing when to wait, right? And when to do nothing. And the medical and nursing paradigm brings into midwifery this whole notion that I'm here, and if you're here, I'm here to help you, and you will do what I will tell you because you're unable to. And in addition to that, we've got regulations that dictate the training of midwives and nurses in South Africa particularly. And these regulations are about half a century old already. It hasn't been adapted, it hasn't been relooked, and it hasn't been interrogated, questioned, or confronted to be in keeping with what birth practice should be for the benefit of women. Because I mean, midwives can't be found competent if they haven't done 15 episiotomies in their training. So women are being subjected to these kinds of regulations, and unnecessary procedures are being forced upon them in order to comply with what the law says. Remember, apartheid was also a law not long ago, so not all laws are just, as everybody knows. And in terms of this, there's this whole hierarchical way of teaching and work systems, because if the head nurse says you're going to do it, you're going to have to do it. And if the seniors are doing something, even if it's completely unjust or potentially harmful, you will not have the power to open your mouth and to stand up against that kind of practices. So in summary, the intricacies of birth are not acknowledged and honored. Birth is still seen as a very mechanical flow of events. There's this very colonial infusion of birth practices still very rife across the country in the training and in the way people go about their daily work. Facility design is something that needs to be completely relooked at, because it's not person-centric. And we need to get the midwifery wisdom back into inclusive birth care, because that is the medical establishment has completely destroyed it over the last 5 decades or so. And we need to look beyond the 4 Ps of labor progress, because there's so much else that affects it. And I mean, this is what these sessions are about today, about the inclusivity of it all, the decoloniality of it all, etc. And it's by time that we create space for anybody, not anybody, but anybody and any person to access and receive the care that they deserve during the childbirthing periods. Thank you. All right, I'm happy to take any questions. We just need to confirm whether load shedding has messed up anybody else's life. We've still got 3 minutes before we need to start with the next session. Anybody? Yeah, let's see who was first. Jess. Jess Russell.
Hello, Jason. Thank you so much. It's such an important presentation and overview. You might remember me. I did some some presentations at Health Sciences on obstetric violence some years back, supervised by Sue Focus.
Okay, yes.
But so I just wanted to ask, because, you know, I think you have a much broader overview, especially of what's going on in terms of the training and nationally, also in terms of service provision. And one of the things that my research, you know, showed was that really pain relief was not available in terms of the pharmacological offerings at the primary care level, from what I could tell in general. And I wondered if you had a sense of if that was also your sense, that once you move to a more higher risk kind of birth, and you're getting secondary and tertiary access to the hospitals, then that might be available, and otherwise it wouldn't be. And I wanted to also hear from you if you felt as though that was the case outside of the Western Cape province, throughout the country, was my first question. And then my second question is, you know, it's very interesting being, you know, kind of juxtaposing the situation of obstetrics and midwifery and birthing practices across geographies, because each geography is very specific. Even within Europe, I've understood that. The care and the kind of hospital professionalization in England is different from Germany, you know, and then obviously we go to South Africa and it's another extreme. And my understanding here is that independent midwifery, of course, is almost non-existent at this point in South Africa. And that while, and I'm saying this also to be corrected by you, because you really have a better understanding. So my sense is that while the majority of people in South Africa birth in facilities and they birth with midwives, the way that they're actually birthing is very medicalized, you know, there's high medical intervention, and the midwives obviously are very controlled within that hospital hierarchy. And I just wanted to get a sense from you if you see any variation in the country around that, or even how maybe that has shifted over time or not.
Okay.
So those were my two questions. Thank you very much.
All right. So in terms of the pain relief, there is this idea that you only get access to opioids as you go up the referral chain. But there are midwife obstetric units that hold opioids, and they do administer it. But that tends to only be in the Western Cape. In other parts of the country, they invoking pharmacy regulations with making this available at primary level. But in the Western Cape, we've kind of seen a way around that. To make it, I mean, no matter where you go, that in the Western Cape, that you have access to certain pain management tools. In terms of what you mentioned with the birthing practices within facilities, it's across the board. You'll find the very interventionist and you do as I say kind of approach to birthing. Although there are some gems in that dirt who do try and make a difference in terms of giving women that choice, or giving birthing people that choice to choose a position that is most comfortable for them. The problem is that those who have been around for longer tend to kind of suppress them, because this is new to them, the old guard, and they feel uncomfortable doing it, and they will ostracize somebody who tries to do, and that's just the nature of what's going on. So we need a multi-pronged approach. Like in Zulu culture, they say you take the approach of a bull, you get the head going in and you get the two horns, or buffalo at least, and the two horns coming. So that's the kind of approach we need to use. So we need people's mind shifts to change. We need our training institutions to kind of come on board to make sure that what they're teaching is current, it is beneficial, it is person-centered, and not just based on things because we've always done it that way. Yeah, so it is a difficult one, and I'm really appreciating the space to kind of, as was described before, to disrupt the current status quo, because we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. All right, thanks, Marjolaine.
Yes, and not turn off the video. I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I really found your presentation very informative and learned so much about the situation in South Africa. And I really appreciate the work you are doing there, from what you've shared, and I'm sure you're doing a lot more. I couldn't help but think back of one of the speakers yesterday, Jenny Joseph, who has a similar mission but approaches it in a different way. She also wanted to, like she said, break down the system. She immigrated from the UK to the US to do her midwifery work. And she actually said her conclusion after decades of work was, we cannot break down the system. It will kill us, well, literally or figuratively. And that's what I was thinking when you were talking about the way things are and your own observations of how things could be different. I guess one question is, how do you stay joyful or positive in the midst of that? Like, how do you cope with that yourself? I think that's what I'm curious about. And the other thing is, like, you were just talking when you were applying to Jess, like, we need this mind shift, we need to change the training institutions, we need to abrupt the status quo, which is disrupting the system. Is that even like possible? Should we be hopeful for that? Or should we be like working on the fringes, creating our own alternative way? And I don't mean alternative medicine, but like our own ways, within, on the outside, on the fringes of the system. Or is it both? Like, how do you see your own work and also the other things that we've been hearing, people working in these fringes, compared to what you're doing, like sort of, fighting from within the system? I don't know if you agree with that framing, but that's how I sort of heard you say it.
Thanks for the question, Marjolaine. I think it has to be the fringes and the inside need to work at the same time. And I think as a body of people, as we are, we're going to be like ants. When there's a body or something edible, a creature or something. So the creature here is current practices. So some of us as ants will eat it from the outside. For others will eat it from the inside. So we just need to decide where we're going to work it from. Because I don't have an answer for that. And in terms of staying joyful, it's about keeping the bigger picture in mind. And if I can change the mind of 20 students out of 250 every year, even 5 students, then I think something has happened. And little, like they say in Africa, how do you eat an elephant? Little by little. Yeah, so that's it. Just try and infusing the passion in people as you go along, even if it's 1 or 2 people a week, a month, whatever. But to reach little bits of people at the time. We even had a medical student about 3-4 years ago who did an elective with an independent midwife. Very, very unusual. And she came back and she was completely blown away by what happens there and she knows exactly what should be happening. So it's those kinds of little kind of victories, those small victories that ultimately, and it might not happen in my lifetime, but hopefully the ball will remain rolling. Thank you. Okay, we've gone 6 minutes over our allotted time. Are Lance and Shanaz with us yet, Rodonta?
I think they are, yes.
Okay.
And they have a load shedding, but it works fine from a hotspot, they said, so they want to try it now, and I'll be sharing their PowerPoint.
Okay, so if Lance and Shanaz can just declare themselves.
Oh, maybe there's a problem now. I was just talking. Oh yeah, I see Shanaz.
Hi, Shanaz. Hi, Shanaz.